Welcome to the second episode of the Minh Tu Le Experience. Today we have another guest, Sam Howard. Sam, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, like you said, my name's Sam. I'm a teacher here in Hanoi at Olympia
Uh huh.
Schools. I teach history, literature, culture, current events, stuff like that.
Interesting, interesting. Because the last episode, the first episode of mine, we have two teachers, and both were English teachers, and now we have another teacher who teaches history and literature. So thank you, Sam, for being on the show.
Yeah, tons of us around
Uh,
Hanoi.
Yeah, I met personally. I met Sam in Hanoi at I believe it was a writing group. Just as when I met Andy on my last episode, and the last episode we talked a lot about. Sam, you weren't there, but we talked a lot about the traffic in Hanoi, air pollution, and everything that was going on, the cultural differences between the north south and the south side, north and the south
Mhm.
southern part of Vietnam, and I kind of Kim is not here because there's supposed to be a guy named Kim here, but he's busy with his family. So today we're gonna talk about time as I initialized the idea, and it's such a broad and a wide idea that we can dive into. There's so many things to talk about time, but we only have like an hour to talk about it because I'm gonna be busy after that. But so I'm gonna get straight to the point. Okay, what is time in your opinion, Sam?
Best definition I ever heard of it. This was must have been like 10 years ago when I was in like an introductory physics class at university. The best way to define time is just the interval between events,
Mm-hmm.
more or less. Like one thing
Introvert.
happens, and that interval between another
Uh
thing
huh.
happening. Um,
Oh, I see. So, is there any so that's the definition, but is it
mhm.
like a second? It can be divided into like 0.5 seconds, but what is the um, smallest measurement of time? Like, what is the smallest amount that you can come up with?
It might be like a picosecond or something like that. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's like 1 millionth of 1 second. There might be something that's even smaller than that. The kind of time that doesn't really, I don't know, impact us on a day-to-day basis, but like might be useful if you're studying, I don't know, physics. You're working with like a particle accelerator or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Oh,
Uh
am I
huh.
still
Okay,
coming through?
I
Like I said, I'm
understand.
frozen.
Well, it's a lot down the rabbit hole when you really get down to the concept of time because from what I understand from the theory of relativity, then time is relative.
Hmm.
So basically, that it can be stretched, it can be it can be relative to depending on where the object is. If I don't know if that's true because you've taken like physics courses before, correct?
Just one or two. And again, like 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, practically we can. In my opinion, in my point of view, I feel like time is really relative because I talked in the last episode how time, you can just sense that as each year passes, time tends to be faster, feel faster in a
Hmm.
way, because I watched this Vsauce video once in when I was like a teenager, and he said something that which each year that passes, then a year becomes less and less on your like let's say you were 60 years old, then a year
Hmm.
of your life would be like 1/60th of your life. So time therefore is relative to how old you are on the grand scale of things. And I don't know about you, but I feel like time is getting faster and faster as I age. How about you, Sam?
Yeah, I noticed that myself, though. I, I think I've heard somewhere that a lot of it has to do more with it's our memories maybe than it is actually like
Mm-hmm.
time as some like external force. Like for example, like say you're 5 years old, right?
Yeah.
And you're walking around and you're just having all of these like new experiences. You're seeing things you've never seen before, eating foods you haven't eaten before, stuff like that. If you're constantly having like kind of new experiences, your brain actually will log those more in your memory than something you've done, say, 1,000 times. Like how well do you
Uh-huh.
remember, like say you have a drive to work? Like there's a lot of people who will
Uh-huh.
take like the drive to work and they get to work, they barely even remember what the drive was like because they've just done it so many times. It just gets maybe like kind of filed
Like
away in some corner of your brain, like, okay,
it's
this
like
isn't a new experience.
something that's become routine can become like repetitive, and that repetition
Hmm.
makes it like it doesn't register in your brain, and therefore time feels to pass faster. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
It's like
because
time,
like you're
it
not,
just like goes through you.
because you're just kind of filtering a lot of this stuff out. It's not really making a whole lot of new memories because it's not a lot of new experiences. Like, for example, I find that time moves faster when I'm working. So like, I was teaching English for a few years up in Sunla, and at first it felt like every day was like an eternity. There's all these new things, these new concepts I was learning about teaching. But after a while, you get into kind of a
Mm-hmm.
groove or a rut or whatever you call it, and it starts speeding
Uh-huh.
up really fast. And then after
I
that, I
see.
took a year off, just traveling around a little bit. I went to a few different countries, learned at least a little bit of a few different languages. That 1 year feels a lot longer than most of the years of my life. And this was
Interesting.
relatively recently too. I was only, I think, yeah, 27, 28. Um,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
but just because I was having those new experiences, meeting new people, um, you form a lot more memories, and maybe that kind of slows things down a little bit. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the nice way. Like if you have like lots of new
It's
experiences all the time, I think it can
I totally
adjust your
get
perception
behind
of
that
time.
idea, because like when my family would take when I was little, when my family would take me on few like vacations, and
Mm.
we would start at 5 a.m. in the morning, and we go like all the different places, and when noon comes, it felt like a lifetime. Like at 5 a.m. to 12, it was like 6 hours, but now 6 hours doesn't matter much to me. Like nowadays, 6 hours is like nothing. But back then, six
Yeah.
hours of driving and traveling, and getting to stopping at a bus stop, and meeting people and talking to people. I think what you're saying is like really is resonating with me. How time can be stretched out by experiences. Like the more you
Hmm.
experience within the time frame, the more you feel like it is so long. It is so very
Mm.
long. It feels like an eternity. But like I feel like the more that we grew up, the more that we're experienced with things. So I still remember the first time that I watched like a comedy, or the first time we did something, right. But now we've
Mhm.
gotten used to it, so we're just like, yeah, it's nothing, like nothing significant. So it doesn't
Mm.
register, or it doesn't have any significance uh, in our mind enough to feel like it's like a certain amount of time has passed. So I think there's some truth to that.
Another
And
way to slow down
what do you
time,
think
I think.
about? Uh huh. What do you
Another
think
way to slow
about
down
like
time, I think. Oh,
how?
sorry.
Uh, I'm sorry. Continue. I'm sorry.
Another way to slow down time I found is if you ever work a really shitty job, if you ever feel
Ah,
like your
yeah.
life's going by too fast, work like a really terrible job that you do not care about at all. If you want 8 hours to feel like eternity, that's a good way to do it.
It feels like 12 hours of doing something.
Yeah, it feels like
Yeah,
forever.
like 8 hours would feel like. Have you seen like Office Space before, the 1999 movie?
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that yeah, like so that's the definition of working a shitty job, and days just blend into each other. But that's paradoxical, because it feels like time passes really slow during
Mm.
when you're doing the job. but when you're looking back, it feels like you're wasting your time away, and it feels like,
Yeah.
oh shit, like, so is the both shitty ends at the same time, how time passes really fast, but at the same time it feels really slow,
Mm.
as opposed to say when you have like really good experience in, you feel like time stretches out, but at the same time, as the saying goes, that how you're having fun and time passes by and something like that. So it's both at the same time. So I think that's the relativity of time, in my opinion. Like experience shape it how time, how we experience time. Like how
Mm.
Einstein once said that. What is what he was asked? I don't think if the quote is true or not, or it's just some internet bullshit. But he was asked once by a journalist that it's can you explain relativity in two sentences? And he said that when you're sitting with a hot girl, 2 hours feels like 2 minutes, and when you're placing your hand on the hot stuff, then 2 minutes feel like 2 hours. And I
Mm.
think, well, that quote is so cliche, but I think it kind of explains time in a very humorous manner, and I really like admire Einstein for that.
Yeah, it's a good encapsulation of it. It's definitely probably the one I'd think of if I wanted to kind of explain that concept in so many words.
I was gonna ask, what is your opinion on how like certain substances can affect our perception of time? Like when we
Hmm.
consume marijuana or LSD or any kind of psychedelics, or even when I use coffee, I feel like a time distortion. So what is it
Hmm.
that makes it like when on weed, time seems to really go really slow, and
Yeah.
when I'm on acid, it's the same too. What do you make of that, and what's your experience of consuming, let's say, THC?
There's a good book I definitely recommend to anybody listening. I think it was Michael Pollan, The Botany of Desire, and he's talking about these four different plants and their interactions with humans. It was apples, tulips, potatoes, and marijuana. Um,
Oh,
and a lot of interesting stuff in that book, and specifically like when he was talking about marijuana, among other things that he said, was that maybe it has something to do with, the old like stereotype that potheads have bad memories,
yeah,
or you can't remember stuff when you're high or whatever it is.
yeah. Like hazy. You feel like you're really hazy.
Hmm. I think that he was suggesting. I'm not sure what the science behind this is, but he was suggesting that because like marijuana inhibits your ability to form memories, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's the other way around. It causes you to focus like so intensely on the moment that you're in
Uh huh.
that you're just experiencing that moment and you're not like filing it away into like some sort of a memory or something like that.
So you're saying that time can be affected by our attention towards something. So when
Yeah.
we have all our concentration on something, that we can basically distort time in a way.
Hmm. It was that, and it was
So
also like the ability to. Do you ever have this like? I get this sometimes, like if I'm high, smoking weed or something like that.
mhm.
Is the food that you eat, or maybe a beautiful view, or
Mhm.
music that you like, even if it's music that you've listened to 1,000 times, if you're like
Yeah.
really, really, really baked and you listen to it, it's
Uh,
almost like listening to it for the first time.
do I totally understand what you're saying. Like I still remember like the first time well, not the first time, but yeah, the very first time I was high, and I
Hmm.
listened to The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd,
Oh,
and
nice.
was like, holy shit, that was like, okay. One thing is that they totally understand what you're going through. It feels like their music is made for people who are getting high. But at second time,
Hmm.
I feel like every song, especially there's a song called Time on that album, it just
Hmm.
stretches on. Like the guitar solo is just like, it is still the same when you observe it. like when I'm high, I'm still aware that it's not like I'm not hallucinating all these sounds. They're still the same, but somehow they feel much more profound, and like the time, like I'm sorry, the time just stretches on when I'm listening to something. So like 4 minutes, but I feel like holy shit, it's been like the whole album, and it's like two songs.
Mm.
And I guess I totally get what you're saying when you're high as hell, and you listen to something, and when you really concentrate on something, then it can become like time distorting. But paradox of this is that when you
I found with
concentrate on
THC,
something, when you're not high, like when you're productive, uh huh. What do you say?
go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say
You
that
go ahead.
when yeah, when I'm high, I, I feel
Hmm.
like time stretches on when I concentrate on something. But when I'm not high, and I concentrate on something, it feels like time flies by. Like, you get what I'm saying? When you get into the flow of like writing, or like
Yeah.
playing music or doing something, it feels like time. And hey, it was like 2 p.m. Now it's right already 4 p.m. So that's so
Mm.
very paradoxical to me.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that too. Certain substances can make it. Sl- I've noticed more slowing down than speeding up. Maybe alcohol, like speeding it up a little bit.
I
Because
think
I
alcohol
have
speed
noticed
is
that,
up.
like, out drinking with people or something like that, you get there at like 8 p.m. and then suddenly you're 6 beers in and it's 2 a.m. and all that, like,
Yeah.
speeding
It's
up by
like
really
time
fast.
flies by.
Hmm.
I think before people like start smoking marijuana recreationally, which was a long time ago, they
Oh,
use
yeah.
a lot of alcohol. They use a lot of alcohol as a substitution for the marijuana banning, and I think
Mhm.
that's where the phrase "time flies when you're having fun," and that
Hmm.
having fun was drinking alcohol. That's just
Yeah.
my theory.
That's a big part of it. It's weird that, like, something like this is like very generalized thing like fun, how much of it ends up being
Uh huh.
associated with doing drugs. And by drugs, I'm also including like alcohol and stuff like
Yeah,
that. Obviously,
alcohol.
you
Yeah.
can have fun without it, but like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
odd to
totally
think
get
about
what
it
you
as just like the
mean.
substances.
Yeah, but drugs. We can include love within that. If you're talking about like drugs, love is still chemicals like oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. So I say
Mhm.
when you fall in love with someone, then it can feel like time time just freezes, like just you and them. Like how in poems people were talking like, oh, I'm so in love with him or her, and time just seems to comes to a stop. So that's kind of the drug. So like I think that drugs really affect our perception of time in a way.
A little bit of a digression. Do you ever think they'll come up with like a love drug? I mean, not like a drug that makes people fall in love with you, but like you could take something and then you just immediately you just feel that like generalized sense of like love and like, oh, the world's a wonderful place and all this.
Well, yeah, I reckon you never try MDMA, right?
Maybe that's it.
I don't
No,
think you.
I haven't.
I don't
I
think.
haven't.
Wow. Oh, okay. So that makes sense because MDMA has been called love drugs by so many others, and I didn't know why until I experimented with MDMA, and it was like love in a pill form. I guarantee you.
Really?
It's like because basically everything like oxytocin and serotonin, when you take MDMA, the amount of serotonin that's released in your brain that is as equal as when you are in love.
Hmm.
So when I'm on MDMA, I just feel like hugging everyone. Like when I'm on a dance floor, I just want to hug everyone, and yeah, I think that might be it because developed in the 1950s or 60s, I don't remember, but they found a long time ago how to make love in a pill form. But it comes with its downside, of course, because afterward you get a crash, and it's really neurotoxic.
Yeah, I've heard really bad things about the come down off of that. Like, Just like it goes from that like that unbelievable high to like you know deep low and depression and all that. Is that what you experienced when you were on it, or?
I did, yeah, from time to time, but with preparation we can, with enough sunlight and exercise, we can get back the serotonin level. So is the general rule is 3 months per use. So every 3 months you can do it. But if you're using like that in between the uses like is less than that, then you shouldn't. It's really
Mm,
neurotoxic if you do it in the long run. But I don't want us to steer it towards like drugs in
fair.
this yeah, but one more thing, yeah, one last thing before I move on to like time again, because I had read on Reddit about how some people take DMT or salvia and they get transported to a completely different world, and this concept of time there just ceases to exist. It's like everything is like it doesn't exist. It's like when you take all the clocks away, it feels like everything's in the present moment, and that really got me curious. And I never broke through on DMT, but I'm just like really curious about how the concept of time just ceases to disappear, as these people describe. Because most of them were atheists, and they came out as after they do the DMT, they were like, I'm not so sure anymore. And it got me curious, like what happens there.
I haven't done DMT. I do know about salvia though. I tried that. It was one time I was already drinking a bit, and then somebody said, "Hey, we got some salvia." And what I should
Holy
have said was,
shit!
"No, I don't want any."
Oh
But
man.
in my state at the time, I did it. I smoked it, and like I felt like I was just transported to a different dimension. I was just like staring at the wall, but it felt like an eternity had passed.
Fuck.
And then when I came to, I was
Uh,
asking my cousin, who was the one who gave it to me, I said, "How long was I out? What just happened?" It's like, Sam, that was like 10 seconds ago.
Holy shit!
Uh,
So yeah, it really felt like an eternity condensed to ten
mm,
seconds. Is what you're just saying, or hours? Or
yeah,
do you have any specific time that you experience? Like was it
it's hard to
long?
quantify something like that. It just felt like it had been on for so long, and it was like when I like came down, it was like really strange. Like I almost barely remembered these people. I've heard of people like doing it and feeling like they had lived almost entirely different lives. Like, they were married and had kids and they had this whole other life,
Yeah, yeah,
wherever it
yeah.
was. And then coming
That's
back and
what I read.
realizing, oh,
That that's the
I'm so
Reddit
this is.
story. I don't know if people are still figuring out if it's bullshit or not, but it certainly doesn't read like it's bullshit because he said that he met this girl in his Salvia trip and they had children and they got old together, and then he has to like come back to reality, and he was
Hmm.
depressed for like 2 years after that. I was like, holy shit, like what the fuck was that? Like, have you ever considered like how fucking like out there the concept of psychedelics is? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not like a spiritual like miracle guy, but just think about it. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe it'd be better just to have like the nightmare trip or something like that. So when you get back, you're grateful. Just like, okay, the demons
yeah.
aren't chasing me anymore.
Even
It's all right.
even in dreams, like I've been having dreams lately, and like just nonsense dreams. But I feel like the time that passes in dream seems to like it feels really longer than it should be. So I had like a 4 hours nap or something, but I felt like I lived like a week in that dream. I once fell in
Hmm.
love with a girl in a dream, and when I woke up, I felt depressed for a whole week because it felt very strong. Felt this really strong connection to this girl, and I still miss her to this day. I mean, fuck. I was like
Maybe she
nine
was
years old
dreaming
or
about you
something.
at the same time.
Yeah, you can say
There's like
that
a
like a
girl in
spiritual connection.
Argentina who fell in love with you, and
Oh my
maybe just
god,
think
like
it's good. Yes.
I don't know what your point of view on spirituality or something, but I do believe in like certain aspects of how the universe can there are certain levels of reality that we cannot touch upon, like
Mm.
vibrations or frequency or something like that. it's not scientifically proven yet, but there's a CIA. Interestingly, there's a CIA document about how they did astral projections in the 1980s, and they succeeded. And this is CIA we're talking about.
Hmm.
So I feel like there are certain aspects of reality that we don't know yet, that we are not capable of knowing yet.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff all around us all the time that like our normal senses aren't capable of perceiving. I mean, just like waves that are outside of like the visible spectrum, for example,
Yeah,
like radio waves, UV
yeah,
light,
exactly.
infrared, stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff out there that isn't like directly perceptible to humans, so I think it's
Uh
something that's kind of important to keep an open mind about. Video went down again.
huh. So like I always see a little off topic. I always how can we imagine like color that isn't on the like visual spectrum, like
Hmm.
the color that doesn't exist? Because I've read many DMT trip reports where they say like they can see colors that do not exist. It's like a different
Oh.
dimension. Yeah, it's like you know how we are in the 3D third dimensional entity, we cannot imagine the fourth dimensional like how it looks like. Just as how a
Hmm.
2D individual on a 2D level cannot imagine us. So
And this
yeah,
is
it
this is like it's a concept that spawned a lot of really good science fiction. My favorite probably is it's October, Halloween time. If you listen to this, I'd recommend reading The Color Out of Space by H.P. Lovecraft. Or they made a movie recently, just a few years back, with Nicolas Cage,
mm-hmm.
which is actually
uh,
pretty decent. It's based on this concept. It's this rural Massachusetts farm, and this
yeah,
meteorite comes down and crashes, you know, into the lawn of basically this farmer out there,
uh-huh.
and it starts emitting this color that no one's ever seen before,
Wow.
and it starts kind of like warping reality in the radius around the meteorite. Like people start seeing things, their body starts changing, or like the fruit in the farm starts growing like unnaturally large, but it's also toxic at the same time. That
Uh-huh.
or Annihilation is another really good one. They made a decent movie with Natalie Portman about it a few years ago, but it's this thing called Area X, where
Well,
it's suggested
I
it's
think
like in the southeast United States,
I
and it
heard about
like
that movie, but never looked
yeah,
into it. So that's what really about like how like seeing colors that aren't there. What you're saying?
seeing colors that aren't there, and it just kind of like warps reality in a strange way. Like if you watch the movie, it's strangely like as unsettling as it is, it's also weirdly very beautiful. Like there's this really interesting shot of there's like deer that are running around in a field, and they have the big antlers that deer have, and they're
Mm-hmm.
growing flowers out of the antlers.
Wow.
So there's
That's
this
like
field that just like, warps all the life around it.
it's like when you're on acid, right? Like everything reality is warped to the point when like it feels like you can see through the veil of the normal reality or something like that. I haven't watched
Or
the movie though,
maybe,
so
or maybe it's you're sober and the entire world is on acid around you.
oh, I see. It's like you're the
Yeah, you
only
still have your
sane
faculties,
person.
but like, okay, the world is melting now. Okay.
Shit. Well, I think let's get back to the topic of time
Hmm.
and time traveling because we're so it's 6:22 right now,
Hmm.
and we're traveling to the future 1 minute at a time.
Yeah,
So
time keeps
I
ticking
read
fast.
something that time traveling is possible, but
Hmm.
only to the future, but not to the past just yet, because we're always traveling like to the future anyway.
Yeah, they say this is one of the things I wanted that came to mind. Discussing time is black holes, right?
Uh huh.
Like these areas of like extreme gravity out in space, and I think related to that extremely high velocity, so
Mm-hmm.
that if you could and you went out and traveled through space and like rotated around a black hole, and you spent like a
Yeah.
year in your time, and you were to come
Mhm.
back to Earth, I guess it would depend on how long you were out there and how fast you were going and all that. But like you could meet your own twin brother, but he would be significantly older than you,
Yeah,
or even on a more levy level,
that's a classic
like they
story
noticed
of
this
how yeah.
with like
Yeah,
clocks, like the ones out in
uh-huh.
space and the space station.
Uh-huh.
They run, I
Yeah.
think, just a little bit slower than the ones here on Earth.
Yeah, that's a classic like example of the relativity of time that I think we all read it when we were like in middle school or elementary. That's what
Hmm.
got me really interested in time back then. Like when we travel like a light year, when we travel to a light years from Earth, and
Hmm.
then we will be as we'll be a year older than the version of ourselves when we're on Earth or something like that, or
Hmm.
younger.
Yeah, I think it would be younger. I think like at least I've heard anyway that there's some relation between like extreme velocity and time dilation. I think the term is that like
Mm-hmm.
time will pass slower if you're traveling at extremely high velocities, so that like you could, yeah, in that way, I guess maybe like travel to the future in a sense. I've heard of
Mm-hmm.
that like future time travel or maybe like through time dilation or something like that might conceivably be possible. But yeah, it seems like going
Yeah,
back is something that would be, I don't know.
I don't
Maybe in
know.
some way it's physically possible. You think of like when you get down to like the very 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 subatomic level, or like
Yeah.
subatomic particles have like very odd interactions with each other that we don't quite understand yet, that maybe on that level something like that could happen, but who knows? And I don't know, I'm not a scientist.
Yeah. We're not scientists. Like, I often think about how um, I've read a lot about how we cannot travel to the past, but
Hmm.
I've often fantasized about doing that because, frankly, there's no way we can recreate what was going. Like, we cannot recreate like 622. It's 625 now. We cannot go back
Hmm.
to that moment anymore. It's in the past. Whereas in the future, we're still like going to the future right now. So I think the closest that we can get to time traveling is videos. So we can
Hmm.
record videos, and there will come a time. There will be a point in time when humanity will create something like we can record experiences and like all the sensation touches. I mean, we're already nearly there practically with the whole like virtual reality shit, and when we get to the point when we can capture experience and then we can experience whatever frame a point in time, then I think that's the closest thing we can get to time traveling, like to the
Hmm.
past.
I have
So it's
a
all about
hypothetical
recording. Yeah.
for you. So there's two kinds of theories. Like if when it comes to like traveling in time in the past, there's probably more, but there's just these two that I'm aware of. One is kind of like the whole grandfather paradox idea that like you
Mm-hmm.
can go back in time and do things that would result in you no longer existing, say killing your own grandfather. Or, you see, like Back to the
Yeah.
Future, right? You've seen that?
Yeah. Of
That
course,
he needs to
everyone
be
has
very
seen that.
careful not to like influence things in such a way that would like basically delete him from existence. There's that idea, and in other sci-fi books, movies, shows, whatever, it's predestination. It's
Oh,
that
I freaking love that.
what what you did
Freaking
is
love that
already
movie.
it's already factored in. You can't go back and change things because like you've always gone back in time, and it kind of suggests that the
It's a
universe is
cycle.
determined.
It's a circle. Yeah. It's like a closed
So
end circle. Yeah.
time's a flat circle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, time is a flat circle is from True Detective, but it still applies
Yeah.
to predestination.
Yeah, that one was the whole idea is that you live this whole life, this one life that you're living now, you just live it on forever.
Gonna live.
Nietzsche also had the idea, eternal
Yeah,
recurrence.
Nishi, eternal recurrence. Yeah, I was obsessed with that idea for years, like eternal recurrence, like how it's like Groundhog Life. You know what I'm saying? It's like we're gonna live this whole life over and over and over, like to the exact same movements that we've done this podcast for infinite amount of times before,
Eons.
and there's no way we can escape it. But I don't buy that idea much because people who say that the Nietzsche's eternal recurrence of time, that is the reason for I'm sorry, the reason for deja vu. I don't buy it because deja vu is when you feel like something is familiar, but what is stopping
Hmm.
what is stopping you from feeling deja vu within the cycle? So the deja vu is still within the cycle. So you're not gonna realize anything. Just gonna feel deja vu over and over again. So time is just that. It's just a loop, and no, it's not a loop. It's just repeat itself.
The hypothetical is this though. If you had to choose, say, like Back to the Future style, or knowing that everything you did when you went back in time was always going to happen, no matter what, which would you prefer? Would you want to be able to go back in time and actually change things? Or would you just want to, like, okay, I just want to check something out, but I can rest assured that I can return to my own time and everything will be as I left it?
I much prefer the idea of being able to go back in time, not changing anything, because Back to the Future did not consider the idea of the multiverse yet. So it's still like one timeline and how you change the past and the future. But if the idea of the multiverse exists, then when you change something, then you change only within that universe, like that past of the certain universe, and when you go back to your own universe, things still stay the same. And there's no evidence of the multiverse just yet. But if I were to think about time traveling, I would consider it. I would take that into consideration, because the grandparents paradox would not make any sense, because you would not be able to exist. So there must be a multiverse for you to be able to travel back in time.
Yeah, or maybe it causes like some kind of like branching effect to the multiverse. Is like just the act of you going back, it changes things to the point where, okay, now it's an entirely new universe, including the changes that you've just made. But
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
curious if you could, if that was a possibility, like I offered you, okay, there's a machine you can use it
Hmm.
to go back in time, or maybe
Yeah,
even like put it like this, you could like rewind your life, let's say, or something like that. Is there anything
yeah.
you think that like strikes out at you as like, oh, I would definitely change this?
What do you mean? Like, would
If
I
you could
travel
go
back
back
in
in
time?
time and you
Uh
could
huh.
change something, what would
Yeah.
you want to do?
I mean, the first thing that pops to everyone's head would be kill Hitler, but
Yeah.
I would not do that. I would not do that because there's gotta be some other person that's gonna replace Hitler down the timeline,
Mm.
and there's too many Hitlers throughout history to be able to do that. I would say, like, practically, um, I should discover that there's this website where in 2010, when you solve like for every captcha that you solve, you get 5 bitcoins.
Hmm.
I would definitely, I would definitely get like thousands of bitcoins before
Yeah.
the price went up back then.
And while
Yeah,
you're at it,
uh,
just go back and just buy a bunch of like Apple stock and stuff like that back in the day.
yeah, yeah. And I wouldn't be here sitting here. I would be like on Joe Rogan fucking podcast or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, if
you'd
I
have
were
to
that
buy it
rich.
compound.
Yeah, but personally, I would not change anything that in my life, in my lifetime, because I feel like all the decisions I made were determined already. Because well, I don't believe in determinism 100%. I still think that, but I'm more sure that everything that I do is within the plan. So everything, because atom affects atoms. It's a chain of domino that is just like to this event leads to this event, this and this and this. So changing anything would not affect anything, but it would still be the same. Like everything
Yeah.
is determined to a certain point.
Yeah, I do honestly. I agree with like probably the predestination thing. Like even if time travel were possible, like it seems to me more likely and I think preferable that I would be unable to change anything and it's just okay. Everything I've done is already factored in, so I don't have to worry about going back in time. I step on a butterfly and I come back to my own time and it's Mecha Hitler running everything or something like that. But
Yeah,
if I could change something, I think what would be really funny is just go back and just fuck with archaeologists. Like you go back, say, to the Precambrian or something like that, or hundreds and hundreds of millions of years ago,
uh
and
huh.
just dig a hole and put an iPhone inside of it,
What the
and you get
fuck,
back to your own time. Like archaeologists
dude,
dig up an iPhone from before the dawn of man.
dude.
That'd be kind of funny.
Or or we could fuck with them by putting a guitar during the before humans evolve. Like there's we can make an evidence that music existed for way before humans that ever existed. I'll be like, yeah, music has always existed. Like ever since even before human existed. Like
Hmm.
I put an instrument there somewhere.
Dinosaur banjos.
Fuck, that's got to be a huge banjo. Like, dude, the reason why I would do that because I read about a month ago that the first instrument was actually not created by a Homo sapien. The first
Hmm.
instrument was a flute and it was made from a bone. So basically, music has always existed. It's like the most primitive way of expressing ourselves. And
Hmm.
this isn't bullshit. There was way before humans would ever evolve. And already
Was
there was
this
music.
Was this like an ancestor of humans, like Homo erectus or something like that?
Yeah, I think. Let me see. The first instrument ever. Uh, Natural flute, 60,000 years old. I don't know
Yeah,
how pronounce it how to pronounce it.
Neanderthal.
Neatro. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
that was the oldest
it's
musical instrument.
from like there's still like a fair amount of apparently like their DNA in a good amount of modern humans.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 'Cause there's some really interesting theories about how like when say Homo sapiens sapiens, which is essentially us, started coming on the
Yeah.
scene and spreading around the globe. We weren't the first ones to do that. I mean, there was Homo erectus and a bunch of other like hominid species, um, other forms of humans, and it seems
Mm-hmm.
like in some cases, okay, with Neanderthals, especially like a lot of Europeans or European descended people have
Yeah.
Neanderthal DNA, so there was apparently at least some intermarriage. But it seems
Yeah.
like in a lot of cases, it might just be that like we wiped them out,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
a mix of things, like maybe like the climate that they had relied on for a long time had changed, or Homo sapiens sapiens just outcompeted them for food and stuff like that. But yeah, it is kind of a grim suggestion that like, okay, yeah, we're the only ones left, and the reason for that is probably not great, let's say.
Are you saying that there were civilizations before us and we kind of fucked everything up?
Well, I mean, I guess like civilization is always kind of a like a loaded term. Like what do you really use to describe a civilization? Is it people living in cities and building big buildings out of stone like the Egyptians did? Is it having language? Somebody had an interesting thought once. I don't remember who that said this, but she said that you can date the beginning of civilization to when you start seeing mended bones. Um, like when some hunter gatherer falls down
Uh
or
huh.
whatever happens, and they break their arm, their leg, whatever it is.
Yeah.
but someone was there to help tend to them and nurse them and make sure they got enough food until the point where the bone was
Uh-huh.
able to heal. She
So
defined that
that
as
would
civilization.
be so that would be a civil, like a civilization of
Hmm.
so that's the where the line that's where we draw the line.
Hmm.
But isn't
But
that
even
like doesn't that exist in animals? Like how animals can help each other with their wounds, like especially like
yeah,
like say pigs, swine, and very smart animals, they can do that. So
hmm.
could that be
Well,
considered like civilization?
well, I guess I mean animals like can work with one another, but either in very small groups or in very limited ways. I think humans are
Mm-hmm.
kind of unique in that we can cooperate with each other in very large groups very flexibly. Like lots of different systems. I mean, just look at every country around the world. Everyone's like a little bit different, and these represent like
Mm-hmm.
millions or even some cases billions of people, say India and China.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that we cooperate is significantly different and more complex. Yeah, like
Yeah.
civilization, it's always been kind of a loaded term. Like it comes from like Latin, like civis, which means
Yeah.
like cities. And there's
Cities.
always that kind of bias. Is like civilization is when okay, we're living in, you know, the form that we are now today. Let's say we're
Mm-hmm.
living in cities and we have jobs and stuff like that, as opposed to people
Jobs
who are
and
just hunter gatherers.
yeah.
But
Yeah. Agree totally. Yeah. Like it's hard to define, and but I still think that humans there's special, like this there's a uniqueness to humanity that is different from other animals. Like how we can build
yeah, definitely.
houses, we can build like electricity. And did you ever notice how within 100 years we went from having the first flight to going to the moon, if that exists at all. I'm sorry to those who don't believe in the moon landing. To fucking Beatles,
Mhm.
to cultural like changes, to AI within 100 years,
Mm.
120 years. That's insane. Like how the process. It There's no animals in the animal kingdom can do that aside from
Mm.
humans. So basically, we're dominating Earth right now.
The one that I find to be really strange, if we're looking at like any one century and just the amount of change, for me, I think it would probably be like the 1800s. Because like say starting at year 1800, like somebody from 2000 years ago, if they went there, okay, there would be some things that would be a little bit different. Of course, okay, oh, the ships are more complex, and like, okay, you've worked out different building techniques, and
Yeah.
okay, you're typing things out on paper, and like, okay, but you're still traveling by horses, and the fastest you can go is either a horse or a sail. And there's been, maybe some improvements in those areas to say like 1899 or 1900, where you have
Mm-hmm.
trains, you have electricity, you can send
Yeah.
messages over wires, like things that are would be inconceivable to somebody living in ancient times, as opposed to like 1800 would have been like,
It would blow their fucking minds. Like just
yeah,
within 120 years, we every decade in the 20th century we have something new. Like
hmm,
in 1930s, we had no, way before that we had telephone, and then we had airplanes, and we have uh,
skibbity
vinyl
toilet,
records. Fuck, skibbity toilet. We have a skibbity toilet. We have
yeah,
I don't know, cell phones. We
realistically,
have fuck. Where that greatest invention is still skibbity toilet, but still the second greatest is still the
that's our
internet.
legacy.
Yep, the internet is like the second greatest invention. Well, apart from
Hmm.
skibbity toilet,
Of course, of course.
of course.
Yeah,
Like
but
the
it's not a
internet
thing
is
that.
the internet changed everything, man. Like I cannot
Hmm.
imagine the life before the internet, and I grew up with the internet. I still feel like it's such a wonderful and at the same time like scary invention. Like we can
Yeah.
talk to each other, we can connect with each other from you know thousands of miles away. We can do whatever the fuck we want on the internet. And I feel like the internet is something that is maybe the next step of evolution. Have you ever given that a thought?
I I kind of oscillate between two extremes in that, like, okay, on one hand, like all of this technological and social progress that is a result of the internet, and there's so much information available at everyone's fingertips, to
Yeah.
technological progress is not worth it, and we should just nuke the internet and start over. I don't know. I go between those two things because, like, I mentioned information earlier
Yeah.
and how easy it is to transfer, but most of that information, or at least a lot of it, isn't of very high quality.
Mm-hmm.
Like the average YouTube video you watch, particularly on something that's important, like, I don't know, science or medicine or whatever, often it's being delivered by somebody who might not know exactly what they're talking about, and that coupled in with all the good information you can find on the internet, there's just so much effectively just discordant noise of nonsense and people's opinions and, you know, their fears or their paranoia about things that, like, and on the other side of it, quality, like, academic research and things like that, a lot of it you can access if you're on JSTOR or something like that, but most of it is behind paywalls. So, like, high quality information is very difficult to access, but bullshit is essentially free.
Yeah, but that
And
can be
yeah,
attributed to the individual. Like how you can, it depends on the person to distinguish between what's bullshit and what isn't. Because, we back in the 80s, I think so. Like there was a lot of bullshit on the television and people ate it up. So
yeah, like the
every
satanic
every
panic.
gener every generation, there's a lot of idiots out there. So there's we're okay. I'm not saying we're not idiots. To some certain degree, we are, but we're a little bit like better than some people who believe in a lot of bullshit theories out there, and they still exist nowadays. So
Hmm.
and back then in the 80s or the 70s. So I think
Yeah.
is about
The,
how we can distinguish. Yeah.
yeah, the counterpoint to that, have you ever heard of the satanic panic back in the 80s?
Yeah, I heard some stuff about that, like how music was fueled by satanic cults and everything.
Yeah, music
The
was a
music
part of it,
industry.
but there was this. It was the most expensive court case in U.S. history. It was this daycare center, and it was a thing like in the 80s. It was becoming a lot more common in the U.S. for there to be like two-income households.
Yeah.
Um, if you're like a heterosexual married couple, like the man and the woman would both be going out to work, so like daycare was exploding in that time. And
Mm-hmm.
there was this one account, I think it was called Jennifer Remembers, written by this psychologist who later married the Jennifer from the book.
Yeah.
So just how
Uh huh.
shady that is. And he spread this account of like there's this satanic cult that's running this daycare center, and they're doing all of these
Wow.
crazy rituals, and they're abusing children and all of this, and it drove like a bunch of people's names through the mud, and like these court cases like went on for years and years and years, and the media was just like totally going along for the ride with all of it, and like uncritically just publishing a lot of this stuff about like, oh, there's these Satanists and they're everywhere, and turns out it was, yeah, it was just a bunch of bullshit. There was really nothing to it except for a lot of people's like mass paranoia, and that paranoia feeding on itself. So yeah, like misinformation isn't really new with the internet, um, but how widespread it is, and especially like in comparison to, like I was mentioning, the paywalls with a lot of academic research, I think that that's something that should be. It's definitely of concern with the internet, and it definitely
Mm-hmm.
has a lot of drawbacks as well as a lot of benefits to people. Like I think it was like recently. I think it was in like I think it was somewhere in East Africa. Like there was this kind of like witch panic,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of it was being spread through just social media. That, you know, there's witches
Uh
running
huh.
around and this or that. And that the internet can be as much of an enemy to us as a friend in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of bullshit on the internet. I agree, and there's a lot of idiots who eat up like all this bullshit. Like, have you ever noticed how how idiotic like the average YouTube comment section is? Like, they don't know what they're talking about. They're so
Yeah.
stupid. It feels like they're stupid and they're fucking retarded. And there's a lot of
Mhm.
retards on the internet. It feels like some of them are not even real. Some of them are AI generated or something. I don't know, man.
There's a stupidity, but I think it's also that like hostility
Yeah,
online that
yeah,
comes
yeah.
from
That
people.
too. Yeah,
Like, somebody posts an opinion, whereas like if you were talking to somebody about that opinion, you'd be more reticent to just like start calling them names or like hurling abuse at them. But like if you can just like kind of hide behind a keyboard, no one sees your face, and you can do all this and just lash out at somebody.
yeah.
It's a reason I generally have a rule. I don't post comments on videos. I try not to interact with people too much online outside of like Facebook Messenger and like somebody once said Morbid Zoo, who I'd highly recommend, a great YouTuber, video essayist. She was saying that
Mhm.
like social media really isn't your friend. It likes to pretend that it's your
Mhm.
friend. Um,
Yeah.
but the internet is it's a lot better the less reliant on it you are. Like if your friend group and all of the people you know is just through the internet, I feel like it's like the social equivalent of eating McDonald's every day. Like,
I
okay, it
see. I
is
see.
food and there's calories in it, but on a long-term scale, too much exposure is not good for you, and I think that holds for the internet as well. Like, it leads to people interacting with each other in some pretty toxic ways, or it can, depending on the community, of course.
It's like the more connected we are through the internet, the more disconnected we are to reality and to each other. It feels
Mm.
like we're there's no authenticity anymore. Like, they just present images of. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not guilty of this, but like when you look at your Twitter and Facebook, you see a lot of images of themselves. Not just
Yeah,
images, but they create this whole persona that isn't them. That's is not
yeah.
authentic, and then you get judges by these opinions and on the topics that you just have opinions from. Because before, I believe it was back then, you can voice an opinion and people would respectfully disagree with you if they have
Mhm.
something. But now they have this mob mentality where they just attack you like no matter the circumstances. They're like, nah, you're a fucking idiot, and then they're gonna attack you like
Mm.
like chimpanzees.
Yeah. And I think that there needs to be maybe a little bit more of an allowance for that. I think that like there's this idea that we should all be smart about all sorts of different things, but like I think if most people were honest, it's that whole like Socratic wisdom thing. It's just like all I know is that I don't know anything. And
Mm-hmm.
that understanding that actually can make you a more intelligent person in some ways is that I think we should all just be maybe a little bit less defensive about our own ignorance because
Yeah.
there's no one human that could understand like everything that's going on around them in the entire world. I mean, it's
No
just too
one.
much information.
No one.
You'd need 100 lifetimes
No.
to like fully understand everything about life. So I think it's important that we be more patient with each other regarding our own ignorance. It's like, oh yeah, okay, you don't know X, Y, or Z. It's like, nobody can know everything. It's an impossibility. So it's being a little bit
And
more, I think, charitable towards each other is
and the
good.
fact that you know something does not make you smarter. It's like, okay, somebody is ignorant because they were sheltered their whole lives. Their experience was limited. They are in Africa. They're made of fucking nowhere. They have no access to libraries. They have access to nothing. They don't know about the Beatles. They don't know about Michael
Mm.
Jackson. They don't know about anything that you deem to be like legendary or impactful. But they're still humans, and
Mm.
why should we disrespect them for not knowing something? Right.
Yeah, and in a lot of those cases, like people like that who aren't really as like maybe dialed into you know like modern technology and things like that. It's odd is that on the individual level, often like they look at like hunter gatherers, for example. Often those people like one on one are considerably smarter than us in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
because it was Jared Diamond. It was I can't remember the name of the book. Guns, Germs, and Steel. Guns, Germs, and Steel. He was
Mm-hmm.
talking about how like
Mm-hmm.
people like living in say Papua New Guinea, like not in the cities, but like deep, deep in the wilderness, hunter gatherers and the like. If they wanted to be entertained, they couldn't just like read a book or watch a movie or something like that. They needed to actively entertain themselves by like telling stories or making up new
Yeah.
games or being creative or thinking about things. And in addition to that, like you need to know, like if you're living, say, a lifestyle like that, you need to know everything about your immediate environment. You need to know which plants are poisonous, what you can use for food, how you
Mm-hmm.
can construct a shelter, how to
Yeah.
fight, different strategies for addressing different predators, diseases, things like that. So on the individual level, like yeah, those people probably a lot brighter than we are in a lot of ways that we might not give them
They
credit
are.
for
Yeah.
because they're not building stone buildings or using iPhones or whatever it might be.
Can you yourself create an iPhone from your hands just by your hand and sands alone? You cannot.
I've never
Yeah, we
tried.
cannot do that. Yeah, or you never try. But that's the point I'm
Let's give it
making.
a
That
shot
is that
sometime. I'll come down to the lot and we'll
every
try to make an iPhone.
every invention that we have is like a whole process of humanity helping each
Mm.
other, like thousands and thousands of the greatest mind in history coming together and creating
Mhm.
what we have today. So one human being cannot contain like that much energy and brightness and the sophistication to create something from scratch. But some people can do that. Like maybe they can. There's this guy who created. Have you ever played Roller Coaster Tycoon before?
I've heard of it. I don't think I've played it myself though.
Well, basically, that game was created by one guy, and was like one guy alone. He did all the graphics, all the audio, all the programming himself in
Hmm.
assembly. If you ever learn programming, you would know that assembly is like the lowest level like programming language. So there you
Hmm.
got Python, which is the highest level, which is the easiest, and you get assembly, which is basically 0 and 1, but like readable. And he did all by himself. It's like building a house from scratch with just toothpicks. And then
Hmm.
so there are certain like really brilliant people in history that we probably haven't heard of yet, or are not recognized enough.
But could he hunt a wildebeest with a
No,
spear?
no, I
No,
bet
probably not.
not.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's that kind of like compartmentalization of knowledge. Like maybe we're born with like different like sliders or something like that, and like our passion in different things, and I don't know if it's like innate abilities really, but like like as we grow, we push everything towards like one area, and then like collectively, like we're a lot smarter now. Like if you think of like the mass of like billions and billions of humans working together, like what we've accomplished is yeah really astounding, considering where humans came from. Um, but yeah, it's
Um,
important to realize that that doesn't equate to like the average person, you or I, being much smarter than our ancestors, say 200,000 years ago.
I don't even know if we're getting smarter or not because Skibbity Toilet is. I just think it's a sign of decline of culture as we know it.
Yeah.
Like what the hell is that? Like you got in the 80s we had Back to the Future. In the 90s we had Nirvana. We had
Mhm.
Pearl Jam. We had EDM. I don't know. We had electronic music. In the 60s we have the hippies and psychedelic rock. And now we have Skibbity Toilet. Well, what the hell the music genre is today?
Well,
It's
I
like
think a lot of it just comes from like we remember the gems and the mediocre or lousy stuff back then just either A didn't get recorded or B no one bought the record so like it didn't get famous. I mean, you can definitely pull out a lot of dog shit from like not just music
yeah,
but
I
almost
agree.
every element of culture that somehow survived. Um, I mean, like Rick
Yeah,
Astley, the 1980s.
yeah, but never gonna give
I mean,
you up.
yeah,
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 truly a
but
gem of human culture that.
it couldn't be a bias like looking back. But what I'm saying is, do you do you feel like in 2020s we have something significant going on? Is there any revolution? Is there any revelation? Do what about fashion trends? We go back to the 80s. We have many like we were so nostalgic about the 80s and the 70s and the 90s.
Mhm.
Like it's like the world is so shitty right now that we have to look into the past.
Yeah.
There's no
Though
yeah, yeah.
I think that's always just kind of been with us. Like I mentioned H.P. Lovecraft earlier, like he really idolized the 1700s. Like he was living in the 1920s. A really good exploration of this, I think, is Midnight in Paris, where there's this
Oh,
writer.
I
It's
love
present
I
day.
like
It's
this
about
movie.
10
Yeah.
years ago, something like that. And he has this obsession with the lost generation, this group of American expats and writers, Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and all these people living in Paris in the 1920s. And he goes back and meets a girl there and falls in love. And she's obsessed with the Belle Epoque, late 19th century Paris, the 1880s, 1890s, Moulin Rouge, I guess, and stuff like that. And just
Mm-hmm.
and then you meet people from back then. And it's like, oh, it was the Renaissance. That was the real time. And then you go to the Renaissance, and they're idealizing ancient Rome. And I think that drive towards nostalgia is always with us because, again, we remember the gems, and we can understand maybe times to say the 20s, 30s, whatever it was, the 80s, a lot better in
Yeah.
retrospect than we can when we're
Yeah.
inside of them. We don't have like the kind of distance that we might need to really understand what really defines our era or what it was about, or like all those things you can look back in time. It's like, oh, those fucking idiots, they didn't see that this was going to come. The 1920s, like, how could they not have foreseen the stock market crash? And maybe with us, that's
I
like climate
mean,
change.
it can be
There's all these
that,
things that look
but
back.
when you look at the 2000 and then you look at the 2010s and then you look at today, 3 different decades, but we don't see that radical changes as compared to the 60s and the 80s. It's like from the 2000 to 2024, it's like one huge decade. There's no like huge improvement in clothing or fashion. Maybe there is some difference, but there's not that much of a difference. Let's just say the 60s or the 80s.
Yeah, with like the 60s, I find like it's interesting, like, at least in the US, like how we perceive, say, the 50s on one hand and the 60s on the other. So 50s, very static, very conservative. Um, the move out in America to the suburbs, white picket fences, suburbs, housewives, things like that. Very, very kind of conservative Americana. And the 60s
Yeah.
with the hippies and long hair and experimentation with psychedelic drugs and women's lib and the sexual revolution and all these things. But if you look into it a little bit deeper, like, I mean, you look at the 1950s, like, that's sort of like when the beat poets were coming around, and like there was actually a
Yeah.
lot of change going on. There's Brown versus Board of Education, a landmark court case that started to get rid of segregation in the U.S. South. There were a lot of like really interesting cultural movements. Jack Kerouac, I think he wrote The Road in the 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been the 40s. Um, and on the other side of it, like if you're living, say, in like a really rural or conservative place in the 1960s, I mean, 1960s are going to be very different in Mississippi than they are in, Haight-Ashbury and San Francisco. So that, like, I think to a certain point, a lot of this is just us kind of cherry picking certain events, and these ones get to define the 60s or the 50s. But you start looking back at these times, like, they're a lot more complicated, and things are a lot more in flux, and people are maybe a lot less sure of things than we might like to think. Not being saying
So
that there
we're
weren't
just
like, a lot of advances in the 60s, but I don't know.
basically
It's
we're
hard
cherry
to.
picking. We're cherry
Yeah,
picking, and basically
to a
we're
certain
looking
extent.
through a rose tinted glasses. Is what we're just saying. That there was a lot of shitty stuff going on in the 60s and the 50s too, like the
Yeah.
saturation and how racist people were back then.
Oh yeah. Shitty stuff. I mean, good stuff too. Obviously, I mean, there's gems in I think any time. Um,
Uh huh.
but I think it's a thing with history is that it's all it's kind of like fractal. Like the more you zoom in, the more details you see, and it becomes harder and harder to find like some clean, coherent, self-contained narrative about like what this time really was.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it was the '60s. I mean, there were as many different kinds of the '60s as there were people alive during that time, I think.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot less people. Like it's like a billion people in the 1967. Yeah, about
Roughly,
I
what I
remember.
mean is more that like the experience of every living person at the time just being like a little bit different. And the '60s were a lot of different things to a lot of different people, let's say.
I see your point. I see your point. It's like and we can cherry pick the shitty music from the '60s too. We got the Monkeys. We got Sugar, Honey Honey, or whatever the
I
hell
think that
that
was
was.
like
But
the number one song in 1968 or '69 and stuff like that. Like you look at back
yeah,
at like, that year and you can find like so many amazing songs and like yeah, You Are My Candy Girl. It's like no, that's what topped the charts back then. So like
oh,
yeah.
okay. Call me an old timer, but I still prefer those songs to Gucci Gang, Gucci Gang, Gucci Gang, or whatever hell that we're having today.
Yeah, but I don't know. There's a lot of interesting music out there now.
Yeah, I'm aware. I'm aware. Like, but it's like a lot of interesting music, but
Hmm.
everything has been done before. You get what I'm saying? Like the '80s,
Hmm.
we had electronic music come to prominent. In the '70s, we have craft work. In the '90s, we have like dance music, hip hop, everything. Now, all the genres are kind of coming together. It's like all the,
Hmm.
like we cannot define genres anymore. Then you can take a song from 2024 and you say like what's this? This is progressive pop. This is psychedelic folk at the same time. It's like
Hmm.
genre doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, just like increasingly like different genres being kind of mixed and melded with one another.
Yeah,
But, who knows? I
it's
mean,
yeah that's
we could see like some
yeah.
like really innovative and fascinating genre of music come out even tomorrow.
I think there's our genres coming out like dozens of genres every day coming out, but it's just that that's the part of the problem that I'm not saying that good music isn't coming out. I still listen to a lot of current music, but it feels like there's so many culture and subculture at once. There's no significant like collective like culture anymore. I mean, we got memes, but that's the that's about it. We got Skippy Toilet. We got I don't know the la- the latest meme like every week where there will be a new trend and then it will be gone.
Mhm.
Remember Gangnam Style 2012? That was like
Yeah.
a whole month of people going crazy or in Harlem Shake, and now
Mm.
gone in the wind, gone with the wind.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. Or you can see it even in like films too. Like I think like Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump came out the same year,
Yeah,
and Forrest Gump won the Oscar for Best Picture, even though it's like okay, it's basically just this kind of. It's not a terrible movie, but it's just banking off a lot of like nostalgia and stuff. It's not like this
yeah.
groundbreaking, fascinating story, but like Pulp Fiction, I think really changed American cinema in a lot of ways, and it wasn't appreciated maybe as much as we'd think it should
Yeah,
have been. And
yeah.
if Oscars for that time were held today, there's a
Well,
much better chance we
well,
won.
I think Oscars has always been shit, like in choosing
Yeah,
movies to win.
yeah, like Leo winning for The Revenant, uh, like The Revenant's another one of those like they come out with those a lot. Those kind of like Oscar baity movies, like The
Yeah,
Revenant
yeah,
one,
exactly, yeah.
Oppenheimer being another example.
Oh,
Like it's a solid movie. I like it,
mm-hmm.
but it's not something I think I'm ever gonna rewatch. There's a lot of those that just like they come out and they get all this like buzz for Oscars and then you never hear about them ever again.
Yeah, yeah. It's like movies nowadays are shit. I don't. Well, there are still good movies, but what I'm saying is everything has been done before. That's my opinion on
Hmm.
this because we come to the point that every like the next step of evolution would be AI. Like AI could make a movie, it could write a song, it could write a book. that it can create a perfect movie with the perfect script, with the perfect actors. It's already been being done by Netflix or some corporation, I don't know. It's already been done, like being in the process of create a series entirely of AI. And that terrifies me that there's no more space for creativity anymore because so many
Yeah, human
possibilities at our
creativity.
hands.
You're just gonna replace it with. I don't know. I mean, I think that's still maybe a little ways off. I mean, who knows? There might be some more advances in AI soon, but I have to say I've never really been all that blown away by the quality of AI writing. It just seems to boil everything down into the same kind of like mediocrity and like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like as a teacher, you get used to seeing it. As I use like ChatGPT on a pretty much
Mm-hmm.
daily basis at this point for different sorts of things, or often like students' writing is coming from that, so I have to like sift through it. You can always kind of tell, and it always feels kind of the
Uh-huh.
same. This very like I don't know, lowest common denominator style writing. It has a kind of dullness to it that I don't think a
Well,
human writer, even a bad writer, would necessarily have.
for now, but if we can tweak the like, there's a variations of ChatGPT, then we can make it do whatever we want with a tip of a finger. It can, for example, I'm gonna use ChatGPT to format my next book. Like formatting is gonna be
Hmm.
good for that. Well, my
Okay.
words are still my words, but I'm just gonna use that for formatting and anything that take unnecessary labor. So that's what ChatGPT is good for. But I don't like the
Yeah.
idea of it taking over creativity, like creatively, like how music, AI music is being produced and AI movies are being produced or
Hmm.
writing, for instance, and it's just sad.
Yeah, a lot of it boils down into how it gets used. As a formatting or editing tool, I think it can be pretty good. Uh, if you're using it to aid your creativity, I think that's good. If you're using it just instead of creativity, I think that's where it becomes very lame, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. It's lame. It's lame, and I saw a lot of people like using their AI to like write their essays for universities, and I mean that is the state of how it is. Like education is means zero now that you can use AI.
Yeah, yeah, it's honestly kind of disturbing. Yeah, the role of AI in education. I mean, I'm kind of at the front lines of that, to be honest. And a lot of what we're going towards, at least in my case, is focusing more on speaking-based assessments because
Mm-hmm.
it's harder to fake that. Whereas, like, a lot of the assignments that are going around in school and like we're writing essays, like in the back of my mind, it's like, what is the point of this? Like, I know that they're just going to be using ChatGPT, or a lot of them are going to be using ChatGPT. So you need to find a way, I think, as an educator to get around that to a certain point where you can encourage students to use it as a tool, but you still
Mm-hmm.
need to be doing like the cognitive work yourself.
I see. I
Um,
understand.
and I think a lot of institutions, education being one of them, it, I mean, institutions have their own kind of inertia. So these things take a while to change, and I think we're still in the process of figuring out, okay, what this means for academia. What does it mean for education that this kind of technology exists?
I guess that's a topic for another day, for next week
Mm.
maybe.
Yeah,
Because
sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
is an hour and 20 minutes now. So
Right, time
thank you guys
flies.
so much. Thank you, Sam, for being on the podcast. And we just
Hmm.
came full circle. We went from time to evolution of humanity, and then we come back to time again. Just a different
Hmm.
approach on time. And I really appreciate your being on on the second episode of this podcast. And thank you all for listening, whoever it is that listening to my little podcast. And I guess we'll see you guys next week, maybe with Sam. If you are free next week, we can do it again with another
Hmm.
topics with a third party.
Oh, before we go, can I shout out something?
Okay, sure.
I've also have a podcast on historical figures. Haven't updated in a while, but it's out
Oh,
there.
I didn't know that.
Chronicles of the Doomed is the name of it.
Chronicles
A
of the
few different
Doom.
people, Cato, uh, Socrates, Katerina Sforza, Julian the Apostate, one of my favorite Roman emperors. I'm thinking of doing a redesign for it soon. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it's on YouTube if you guys want to check it out.
Oh, all right. Now I didn't know that. You never said that said anything about you to have done a podcast in the past. So, well, check it out, guys. Chronicles of the Doom. Is that the name? Chronicles of the
Mhm.
Dooms.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next episode. And Sam, thank you once again.
Yeah, man. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good one,
You
man.
can hit the record button